Hey guys, Cyrus of Chaos here with Sam Moelis. Today we're going to be talking about the Richard Kruse and Alessio Foconi bout from World Championships in 2018 in Wuxi, and we're just going to jump right into it. Now, we recommend watching this bout before you go to practice so that the things that we talked about are fresh in your mind and are more easily applied to your bouts in practice.
I've watched this bout, but I haven't really put it into words and stuff. Foconi is actually down for a good chunk of the bout. The reason why Foconi is so consistent is because he's constantly thinking about distance-wise how to create some kind of relationship with his opponent, without necessarily trying to touch them, constantly coming forward and just kind of holding there for a second to be like, this is where I am right now relative to my opponent. And more often than not, the opponent is doing something that he capitalizes on. Where it's like, I believe, for example, with my fencing, when most people take lessons, the actions that you're doing are beautiful. You're in advanced lunge distance and you're doing an advanced lunge with a feint disengage and you're hitting them, but that doesn't exist in fencing.
Because getting to that distance is really difficult.
Not only that, it's just there's two people that are moving and but the whole point is that let's say you call that touch a posterizing touch. Okay. You just it's beautiful. So those beautiful touches, good fencers get out of their head that's going to happen 15 times in a bout. The only fencer in the world that will posterize you 15 times is Garrick Meinhardt. That's it. No other fencer in the world is going to do that. So if you're not Garrick Meinhardt, you have to accept the fact that those beautiful touches, you're going to get 2-3 times the bout. Let's say 20% of the bout. So or less. So you have to. So the best fencers in the world accept that 80% of their touches are trench warfare. That you're coming forward, trying to
I love that.
But you know what I mean? You're coming forward and
I know exactly what you mean.
You're trying to establish a relationship, and all of a sudden the other fencer flushes you and you counterattack and you hit them because you know where they are, you know where you are, and they don't. And that's why Foconi right now is so brilliant, is because he's not flashy.
He's really scrappy.
It's not even scrappy. It's just he knows where he is at all times. At all times. And the reason why is because he's not going forward being how am I going to hit the other person right now? He's establishing, let's say from a little bit outside of lunge distance, he's constantly, it looks like he's kind of coming forward but not really attacking, but he's constantly relationship, because the other fencer, they're going to be moving backwards, they're going to be moving forward, and he's constantly here I am. Now here I am back in lunge distance again. Now I'm back in lunge distance again, So in the beginning of this bout, you're going to see that he's constantly trying to establish this relationship, and Kruse is one of the hardest people in the world to do this with, because the cadence of his attack is so hard to keep in pace with. He's 6'5", 6'4", and he's marching at you.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he has a nasty counterattack.
Yes, I've heard that too.
The guy has a nasty counterattack. So it's all, and the thing is, if you're like Foconi, it's hard with someone that big that also uses his height to keep a relationship at lunge distance. But you're going to see that the person who's trying to constantly establish the relationship is usually the person that ends up winning the bout. Because the second that the person that's quote-unquote feeling it drops the ball and they're not feeling it anymore, the person that doesn't need to feel it because they know where they are relative to the other person is the one that's going to win those scrappy touches, which make up 80% of the touches.
Makes sense.
So you're going to notice that this bout, when Foconi pulls ahead at the end and wins, touches are not nice. They're they're infighting power posts that you can even argue they are past their guards and you should call halt. But in the beginning, you're going to see him constantly trying to establish this relationship and getting capitalized on counterattacks and stuff like that until he stops trying to go forward and hit him. And eventually, Kruse ends up losing this feeling of how can I counterattack and stuff like that, and Foconi's able to win that trench warfare.
Like you said a lot about the feeling, and a lot of the time people always tell me oh, I just wasn't feeling it today. And a lot of the time the way that you get out of that is by having a more constructive plan. But there are some fencers who fence a lot on feeling, and if you're just not feeling it that way, that day, that can be a problem.
It also is just it's unfortunate that our sport, if we were doing something like powerlifting, there's very tangible numbers to know that you can lift. This is my max. This is my goal, Fencing is made up of a lot of intangibles where it's feeling it and being on that day.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to train your butt off for 3 months for a competition and not perform that day because you weren't feeling it.
Yeah, totally.
I believe that it's part of it. I believe that you do have to have some intrinsic skill of distance and timing and being able to physically hold your fingers on a blade and be able to make touches.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you were fencing and your coach in your box says you have to feel it, or even things like be patient, in the moment, you're like, what does that mean? If he yelled at you, lunge with a feint disengage, you're like, I know what that means. I can do that. But if he's like, be patient, does it mean bounce around and do nothing? Does it mean just defend? You know what I mean? So that's the other thing is like you want to lose those like intangible words like feeling it and being on and stuff.
Yeah, totally. All right, let's get into the bout.
Yeah.
Oh, and the commentators just said that these guys fenced earlier this year in the Cairo finals, and Kruse won the bout.
Yeah, Kruse won. So just imagine trying to establish a relationship from lunge distance with a guy that's moving like this.
Yeah, look at the difference, like the height difference. It's like a head taller than him.
And also keep in mind that Kruse's cadence right now is going to completely change by the middle of the bout, and Foconi is going to be the one that really capitalizes on that.
I like the way Foconi's not really biting.
It's not even, yes, he's not biting, because a lot of it's very tempting for just like Kruse likes to establish, for me at least, Kruse is establishing a game of your turn, my turn. To be like, look, my attack's over, now it's your turn. But if you fall into that trap, for Kruse, it's really his turn on offense and then it's his turn on defense.
Because he's so good at counterattacking.
Right, so, or just defense in general. So if he's pushing forward and all of a sudden he just pulls off and goes back, he's giving you that feeling of, look, it's my turn. But you can see here that Foconi's not like, oh, I have to go hit him now. He's, how do I establish this relationship of about lunge distance? Ooh. Because usually within that lunge distance space, the opponent is going to do something that Foconi can capitalize on. But right now, he hasn't launched up any attacks, 0, because Kruse hasn't given him the opportunity to get into that space for something to happen.
Do you think Foconi should be trying to create more of that himself, or
no? I mean, I think right now, I think he could have done that a little bit more in the beginning, but with the way that Kruse is moving, it would be very difficult. The only one in danger of getting hit, if Foconi's trying to actually make an action happen,
that's a hard angle to hit too.
Yeah, it's a really hard angle to hit. I mean, that was not necessarily lucky, but it was just, there's nothing you can do about that.
That was like, what was it, flick to 8 from really close distance?
But here we go. Foconi is like, where am I right now? Without popping something off. But an action like that, for example, is like he has the ability to know when Kruse's start is. Like the way that he's coming forward, because he's constantly establishing that relationship from lunge distance, he's able to know when to move backwards, which already, like very few people in the world would have been able to stop that attack. And another thing to notice is that that's the biggest that his attacks are going to be, is going to be with a lunge. No bigger. See?
He doesn't want to risk holding too much.
But
even
look,
that was like the longest he's done so far. It was like 3 steps.
But see how he's constantly able to keep with him and keep that relationship. You see, that was, again, a mistake on Foconi's part in the sense that he didn't reestablish that relationship from lunge distance before he executed an action. So he's reaching top speed while he's in lunge distance, which is something you don't want to do, you know?
Yeah, totally. Even in Sabre, that would be too close to hit the person. Like you'd want to be finishing at that point already.
And another great change by Foconi is that's one of the last times he does anything bigger than lunge in terms of an attack. See?
Yeah.
It's going to get no bigger than that. And you'll see that the more that Foconi starts to master this distance, the more that Kruse stops moving and he just ends up just hitting him. You'll see at the end of the bout, he hits him like 2 or 3 times on just a coupe and touch, right to the chest or the flank.
The poster touches.
Yes, and that's what's so great is that if you can master that trench warfare, then that percentage of like 80% quote unquote dirty and 20% clean shifts to like 60-40.
Wow.
Yeah. Unless you're Garrick Meinhardt.
Hi, Garrick.
Go USA.
That seemed a little bit.
Yeah. And this is going to happen about 3 or 4 more times.
Yeah.
Still, though, that's not a loss by Foconi. He established, if we can even go back, if that's possible, he establishes a relationship from lunge distance, right there, and he makes a decision to fully extend out with his arm after making that relationship. Again, Kruse is an animal in the sense that he's really tall. He has a very good counterattack. But again, it's not a loss for Foconi. His ability to still establish that relationship and make it and execute an action from there is still a victory.
He had the right timing and distance. He just went to the wrong line. So but that's an easily fixable mistake.
Yes. So you'll see that when going into the next period, that you won't really see the big change until the third period. Coming into this one, though, I believe that at least Foconi's coach, if I had to guess, is telling him that yes, he has to establish this relationship in which he's doing, but has to keep in mind that he has to gain some kind of credibility for his attack. That if you're just coming forward and constantly like, come hit me, then all of a sudden the opponent, like Kruse, is not going to be afraid of his attack. He's going to be like, all right, come forward, whatever. I'll wait for you to stop, and then I can start my push, which I'm really good at.
Yeah. So Kruse has no reason to really be scared of him now.
Nothing.
He's not hitting him at all.
Right.
Those highlights are nice, but let's get back to the fencing. Also looks like he's trying to control the blade a lot more right now than he was before.
But see, this is where the relationship starts to get very interesting. Is like another thing that you'll notice that at least I noticed and I felt was a little different was that this relationship went from lunge distance to about like a half a step outside of lunge distance. Because someone like Kruse that's so big, you have to compensate for that in some way.
Yep.
And that's why he's able to do these actions where he can finish with a lunge and then still take the counter power post and touch again. See, there. This is where he wants. No, a little bit closer. Wait till he comes. This is where he wants to be. That space right there. And you'll notice that he's never really accelerating. So, for example, that was just kind of unlucky.
Unlucky in the sense that he kind of slipped off with his blade?
It was a counterattack. Foconi was on the blade. He was in the distance he wanted to, but I think with less of an intention to touch his opponent.
Yeah. Didn't really twist or do anything. He just kind of missed.
But again, even in situations like this, I feel like Foconi has had Kruse has gotten 4 out of the 5 touches, but Foconi has had so many small victories. A lot of the touches in between lights are little small victories of who is winning this phrase, regardless of light. Like that one right there. This action right here.
For those of you who are watching, we're doing this all on YouTube. So if you do period, you can move forward a frame, and if you do comma, you can move backwards a frame. So
if you notice, Foconi has established this relationship, this distance, which for him is a little outside of lunge distance. He could do an appel lunge or a very big lunge, and he's able to recognize that here and notice that he can reach his top speed before he gets into lunge distance, so that he's able to there. At this point, if Foconi's getting his point on, the bout's over. The bout's over. He just got a little unlucky. But this is the first time in the bout that he's able to establish this relationship that he's been working for the first 5 touches of the bout, and actually on his own initiative. He's not finishing because Kruse counterattacked. He was going to finish anyway and get his arm out to touch. Bang.
There we go.
He got trapped there.
Again, it very much depends on who you're fencing. I think a change between the first period and the second period is that his relationship went from lunge distance to a little outside of lunge distance. Just because of who you're fencing. Maybe he decided to be on his blade a little bit more so he can read when the opponent counterattacks.
So the major change was being on the blade and opening up the distance a tiny bit more.
A little bit more. And again, gaining credibility with his attack rather than just feeling like he's coming forward waiting for Kruse to mess up. Because now, the more that he's getting hit with attack, Kruse has to be like, all right, I can get hit in both directions now.
Yeah.
But already you can start to notice that Kruse's cadence has changed a lot now.
He missed his first one.
Yeah, I remember in the beginning he was like bum rushing him in both directions. Now...
And it wasn't working.
Right.
Looked like he actually touched him on the back there. Just didn't...
like this one, yeah. And that's the thing, like once Foconi's getting his point on. Also, I know this bout is definitely focused on Foconi, what Foconi decides to do, but Kruse is also dope. Much respect to Kruse as a fencer. I mean, the guy's been to, this will be, I mean, hopefully if he can stay healthy, his 5th Olympic Games.
Yeah, geez. I also noticed that Kruse is not pushing and pulling as much in the second period as he was in the first, as you said before.
And again, this is the advantage of the little guy in this situation, is that if you're the guy that is making this relationship, within the bout, when mistakes are made, you are the first person to recognize that. So in this case, Kruse is coming forward without the intention to finish. He crosses his line of what I guess will be lunge distance with still no intention to finish, and he gets what I call being posterized on something on defense. That will be one of Foconi's 2 or 3 beautiful touches of the bout. Mm-hmm. Everything else will be what you've seen so far.
I hate getting whacked in the fingers in foil.
Yeah. Sucks. I hate that.
Kruse is so comfortable in the back line too.
Honestly, in both directions, but he definitely starts to lose his comfort.
When he starts to hit those things?
Keeping that cadence, yeah.
And a lot of these interactions where he's either missing and not being punished or he's getting an off-target leg kind of give him more information about what Kruse likes to hide when he's counterattacking and where it's safe to finish to.
And you'll also notice that it's hard not to focus on Foconi in this bout because he is the one who is constantly initiating the engagement between the 2 point. But to make it actual fencing words, to keep a relationship from lunge distance rather than just trying to make stuff happen. Like Kruse is keeping his point in line because with his size and with his skill, he can afford to do so. Mm-hmm. But Foconi is like, I'm here, I'm in lunge, I'm in lunge, I'm in lunge, I'm in lunge. When he counterattacks, I'm able to try to adjust.
Yeah.
You know? But again, in my opinion, it's the person who's constantly making that relationship that will end up winning the bout.
More often than not.
Right.
It's the difference between, and even if it doesn't work, it's the difference between, like, if for those of you who play baseball, striking out swinging versus striking out looking.
Right. Again, a very unlucky action, but another thing to keep in mind is this is what you could use as a definition for patience. If you're saying, what does be patient mean? Does it mean, just be on defense? Does it mean just bounce around until something happens? A way to put it into fencing terms would be to put pressure on your opponent, constantly making sure that you're in some specified distance that you want to be in. Because if that's all you're thinking about, your opponent will do something, but in a distance where you have an understanding of where you are and they don't. And for me, that's a good definition of patience.
Oh my God!
Here we go. This is where you really jump into the trenches of like, you want to duel in lunge distance? Let's do it right here, and that's what you're going to see for most of this bout.
Oh my
But again,
God.
around 7 or 8 is when you really start to see the shift of Foconi really start to take off because these kind of engagements are where he thrives the most.
A lot of the Italians are so good at that kind of scrappy touch. Ooh.
A little late on the repeater lights. Looks like he got him on that one.
Yeah, I thought he was going to get one leg on that one. You got him on like the lower thigh or something.
Yeah, that's the worst. We're going to hit you on like the backhand or something when you counterattack. Small victory. It's a little small victory there. Mm-hmm. Last time he did that action, he got closed out with a counterattack.
Looks like they both thought that at least one of them hit.
The sport can be so mean sometimes.
Ooh.
Again, one person is focused on this relationship. The person focused on the relationship constantly is aware of where they are. Foconi knows that he's in this tight lunge distance, right there.
And you say that only one person is trying to establish it because Kruse is mostly just coming forward and trying to finish with him, right?
Right. I mean, Kruse, I think premeditatively would have done that cadence of kind of an up advance and then an extension with his arm, regardless of if Foconi counterattacked or not.
It's kind of what he does most of the time.
But these are the adjustments. So even in here, Foconi was not planned. This is an action where Foconi was clearly not looking to finish his attack. Mm-hmm. He was just looking to, again, get into lunge distance. Kruse just happened to counterattack in a distance that Foconi is highly aware of, giving the ability to just shoot out his arm.
Yeah.
Foconi has leveled the score. 6-all.
Now, it doesn't... It's only 6-6, but a lot of fencing has just occurred.
Yeah.
For 12 touches.
True.
Both fencers are less than halfway there, and a lot of fencing has happened. But now, this is a beautiful way for Foconi to end this bout. A great way. Now he's going into the next round being like right at the end of the period. Foconi has gone in, finally being able to establish that distance, and you're going to see him run away with it now.
So if you were Kruse's coach, what would you be telling him to do at this point? Because what Foconi is doing is obviously working pretty well.
Right. I mean, one thing would be to come forward, but in a way that you could put pressure on him to kind of get Foconi in more of a reactive place. When Foconi is coming forward with a very tight and nice feeling of where he is, it's incredibly dangerous. So if I was someone like Kruse, I would use my size and be on the blade coming forward, but almost with the intention not necessarily of finishing, but of just constantly putting pressure on Foconi, because again, in this kind of scene, you can get someone to crack and just start counterattacking and stuff like that. And if he gets up 1 or 2 touches, he can go camp in the back of the strip again if he wanted to.
And I know that for people who are so used to their counterattack working really well, that was a long attack.
Again, I do think that maybe he was told something similar like this, like Kruse is getting pinned at the end of the strip. Try to open it up a little bit. I mean, remember in the beginning of the bout when he was frolicking.
He's pushing and pulling more now already.
Yeah. But again, this lasts for a couple touches, and now you're back right here again.
Yeah. Ooh, that was nice. That was a coupe you were talking about.
That's your second posterizer of just something he tries to do in the beginning of the bout, but before he had a feeling of that relationship. I'm in lunge, here comes the coupe, and touch.
Yeah, it was almost like a classic saber feint cut. I'm going for your shoulder, just kidding.
But it took 13 touches to get that one. It took 12 touches to get that one.
Oh my god.
This will also look like the last touch of the bout. But again, you have to learn to love the trenches. You got to learn to love it, and that's another thing. If you can't love it, then when you're on a day where you're not feeling it and you're not able to posterize someone 15 times, you're going to be really angry when you fence and you're going to be frustrated. There are times when you're not fencing well and you hit someone with the counterattack and you're like, dang, and it's like, you can't be thinking like that. You got to learn to love it.
Yeah, take it from me. There's no problem with winning by looking gross.
Yeah.
Oh, again, that looked like the perfect disengage. It just didn't hit.
Right.
But he's going for a target that's kind of hard to hit, so.
And it was a nice touch by Kruse as well.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, that may have been Kruse's last touch of the bout.
Oh, that would be crazy.
I'm almost positive it was.
And he's so ready to finish now.
Yeah, I mean,
as soon as he crosses the threshold.
Kruse's cadence has completely changed. Foconi has spent at least half the bout establishing a relationship from a little bit of outside lunge distance, and now he's just kind of free to execute whatever he wants, because if Kruse doesn't break and counterattack to where Foconi can counterattack or para post himself, now he's in a position where he can get there and is very comfortable doing a feint coupe and touching him with lunge.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that happens? The worst thing that happens is that Kruse takes his blade and then Foconi can just take it back because he's a little bit outside of lunge distance.
Yeah, true.
I mean, perfectly set up.
That was a cool angle.
And this is another thing that's very important, is that when a fencer gets on a roll, it's very easy just to lose what's happened to you. So especially like if I was him, I would have, after this action, right here, I would have done something if I was Foconi, like flesh at Kruse or like just start an attack, but that hasn't been working. Foconi is, I'm sure this is exciting to be up 5 touches away when you were down and stuff like that, but he's constantly like, all right, establish the relationship again. See, he's not launching off an attack here. If you would be like, just hit him, you know what I mean? But he's not. Where am I? No,
and Kruse isn't going backwards, so he's not going forward.
And that's why, like, this kind of stuff, he's not going to hit him on this kind of stuff. Right here. That. I'm not going to touch him on it. If he was creeping forward looking to hit him, probably would have just gotten hit with a counterattack.
Yeah.
But he's not looking for that. He's constantly keeping that relationship, that these kind of things, I'm not going to hit him on it.
I think this situation is so important because Kruse is not giving up any space, so Foconi's not going forward until he feels ready.
And they'll show it again. You get another posterize. That's his third one.
You can really see Kruse follow the blade not once but twice.
Yep.
That was crazy hard to hit too.
Yeah. But again, look at where they are in terms of distance. I mean,
It's a little too close.
A little too close, but in a
little too close for the attacking person.
Right, but in a distance that the defender in this case has been constantly trying to make for the entire length of the bout.
Yeah. No, this is where Foconi wants to be for sure. It's frozen.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. They're coming so quickly and so easily. Although, to be fair, Kruse has to push a little bit, so.
But the work was put in the first, when it was 6-6, you know?
Wow, that was nice. They both like that flick to 8.
Yeah. I mean, they're both really good at it, too.
Big gap, 5 points. Not much room on the scoreboard. 15 to target. Only needs 2 more. Kruse is going to have to risk something.
That's such a risky thing to do at that point.
Yeah, I know. But at the same time, he's been very successful with it as well. I just think at this point, it's like, obviously you never give up, but it's tough to be in this position.
I love Foconi sees here that he's going for his shoulder / back
and just gets
twists his back out of the way.
Yeah, Italians are good at that.
Yeah. That was nice. No closeout needed. Just remove the target.
And you're about to see one of the ultimate trench touches. What a great bout.
Yeah, that was a good bout.
15-8. And in the end,
You could really see a pure changes between each period. You could see the first period, an unsuccessful attempt to establish a relationship, a second period of a very successful attempt to establish the relationship, and then the third period of that person that established that relationship to run away with it. To go from 6-6 to 15-8 at a World Championship final. So I think the biggest takeaway is that a lot of times you have to add words that have meaning rather than being like feeling it or being patient. You have to know where you are relative to the other person and constantly trying to recreate that without necessarily trying to go and touch them every single time.
Yeah, for sure.
But really great bout.
Something I definitely didn't understand before coming into foil from Saber is like why not every attack is developed, but it's hard, man. And sometimes just because you have right of way doesn't mean you need to hit them because the distance is not always right to do so.
Right. It's actually to give some respect to épée. It's very similar. Like a lot of times, when if you don't fence épée and you're watching épée, it looks like they're just bouncing around. But if you watch épée with an épée fencer, they're like, "Oh, did you see that?" And you're like, "What?" They're like, "Did you see the prep, like the feint that he did to his arm?" And then it's like you do these little things in a microcosm that end up growing into how you make an opponent think a certain thing for the entire length of the bout. Mm-hmm. Why is someone like Kruse at 6'4" doing every action from lunge distance at the end of the bout? Why? You know what I mean? It's because the first 7 touches of the bout, the first 12 touches of the bout were spent being like, this is where we are going to play this game.
Yeah.
Right here.
That's an interesting perspective. Do you have any more closing thoughts on the bout, or?
Closing thoughts on the bout. Both incredible fencers. Much respect to Kruse, though, especially just for the longevity of his career and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And also, I believe just that Foconi is able to keep this consistent level because this sort of fencing makes you very adaptable for a lot of who you're fencing. And also, it doesn't rely necessarily on feeling or being on, because maybe you need to feel it to touch someone, but if you're not necessarily trying to touch someone, it doesn't matter if you're waking up and you don't feel it that day. It's just waking up and being like, where am I relative to the other person today?
Yeah, to be clear, having a feeling, like, there's nothing wrong with that, but there should be like a range, right?
Right.
And if your top range when you're feeling it is not that different from your low range when you're not feeling it, that's great. But if on your top range you're winning world championships, but on your low range you're like not making it out of pools, then you've got a problem.
Exactly.
And you need to rely on something a little more tangible than, or develop a game plan that's like a little more tangible than just that.
And the tangibles are very consistent. There's nothing more consistent than tangible. If you can write down on a piece of paper of what you believe it means to be a good fencer, you know that it's good if you give it the piece of paper to someone that's never fenced before and they understand what it means. They're like, oh, I get it. You know?
And I'm sure Foconi is thinking actively about like how he's approaching his distance, like thinking, all right, this isn't working. Maybe I need to push the blade a little more. Maybe I need to like widen my distance a bit.
Yeah.
But I'm sure those thoughts are being consciously had during the bout, as opposed to some people who just kind of are like, oh, that didn't quite work, and just get back on guard. And
right, because if you looked at a feeling perspective, if you watch the first 6 touches of the bout, it looks like Foconi's not feeling it at all.
Yeah.
But those are the 6 most important touches of the entire bout.
because he's just trying to like figure out a game plan with the information that he's given.
Right.
So.
I mean, the first half of the bout was in 2 periods, and the last 10% of the bout happened at the end, which was like 8 touches.
Yeah.
Those last 8 touches, So.
It's true. Anyway, thank you so much, Sam.
Yes, thank you for having me, of course.